priority. It went from first to last. So I always question whether or not they really intend to put the streetcar line there after they do all the other stuff first. Also, there's a great book called Mule to MARTA, which has all the information you were talking about of how we lost our electric system through collusion through a business ship with Mayor Hartsfield, who the airport was named after. You won't read much about this, it's in there. Mayor Hartsfield was a good friend with a man in the bus business, Metzger, I think his name was. And they went into business together and colluded to put the streetcar system and electric cars out of business.
Well, let me just speak to that first issue about, maybe there's something helpful about the Beltline. Wouldn't it be great if, we could just have additional service to, get to where we need to be? But that's exactly one of my criticisms of the Beltline, because what it's doing is taking away resources and money and energy that should be going to MARTA to make it a better transit system. Because we wouldn't need a Beltline if MARTA was funded by the state and if MARTA provided citywide service. We wouldn't need a Beltline if we had a public transit system that was governed by workers and riders who determined that we need more routes, not more cuts. So really the Beltline is an unnecessary project. Of course they're going to sell it as something helpful. We're going to have green space, we're going to have bike trails, but again, we don't have to dismantle black communities to have this. All we have to do is fund MARTA, right? When you think about $600 million that they're earmarking from the Transportation Investment Act to go to the Beltline, think about how that money should go to MARTA. In fact, the Federal Transit Authority Administration refused to fund the Beltline because it determined that the Beltline would not serve the needs of transit-dependent riders in Metro Atlanta. So at best, the Beltline is a project for those whom the city wants to prioritize, people of affluence, and basically create a segregated system so you don't have to get on MARTA necessarily and ride with black riders. So for all the good that you can name for the Beltline, I would say that could be done right now better if we were to fund MARTA. So we don't need a Beltline. And I'll go on to say that if you ride the buses and the trains, and if you ask transit-dependent riders what they think they need to improve transit, they don't say, give me the Beltline. They say, give me MARTA service. I want all-night service with MARTA. I want MARTA to go everywhere. I want lower fares. So this is a project dreamed up by elites, for elites. Now, I did not know that there was a vote on the Beltline. You have to show that to me, because that's again one of my criticisms, that there was never a public referendum on whether we should have the Beltline. Never. This was decided by elites and elite spaces. Sure, they drew out some community folks to give the cover and illusion of public participation. But again, I challenge everyone right here today to get on MARTA and ask a transit-dependent rider what they want to make transit better. And I bet you don't hear, give me the Beltline. What they want is more MARTA service. So that's what we have to be fighting for. We cannot be persuaded by these illusions of a better environment, better green space. Yeah, we can have that, but we can have that without the Beltline by funding MARTA and keeping our communities intact, funding public programs in our communities. We want green space, have the communities that are being affected by the lack of green space construct green space, fund them like you're funding the Beltline. We want better amenities in our communities. The city should, instead of taking tax dollars to give to a private developer, should give it to the communities and community organizations to redevelop their communities while keeping the character intact and helping to improve all the things we think we need, like environment and transportation.
I'm concerned about how MARTA will be used with the Beltline because it will be MARTA operated for the Beltline, but so essentially, like, the Beltline is the people that built MARTA, that have been paying for MARTA all along, are now, all of those resources are being used to, you know, for the Beltline without people voting on. That's how they want MARTA to use its resources again away from MARTA but to the Beltline. So all the, you know, brain power and energy that people could be using into making MARTA better is having to go to meetings about making the Beltline, how they're going to operate the Beltline and stuff. But also, what does that mean, like, longer term, as far as who MARTA serves in the future and who makes decisions if it's no longer a, you know, I mean, would it no longer be black run like it is now? Because essentially MARTA is, you know, one of the largest black run, like, transit systems that's, you know, done a really good job what it does. But what would it mean for the future if it's MARTA operating Beltline?
Well, you know, as I talked about first, we got to situate the Beltline within a broader neoliberal agenda. And part of that is to privatize MARTA. And the only way they're going to be able to really privatize MARTA is to continually, through different means, deny it resources and funds. So as we learned in books like the Shock Doctrine, they have a standard operating procedure for privatizing public institutions. Drive the institution to near crisis. Put it in the ICU, if you will. And then once it's in a position where it's near death, then you'll have entities like the Chamber of Commerce or private developers who say, hey, if you privatize this, we can find the resources to not only save it, but make it better. But if we understand privatization doesn't lead to better service, it leads to worse service, right? We understand with the water privatization debacle here in Atlanta that we were sold a bill of goods about how much better our water quality and service would be if we privatized it. And all of that turned out to be a lie. We also see at Grady Hospital, they did the same procedure. Governor Perdue withheld $80 million from Grady's budget, threw it into a financial tailspin. Then the Chamber of Commerce came back and said, hey, we can find money to save Grady if you privatize it. Because guess what? If you don't, Grady's going to close and there's going to be a patient tsunami. You got to do it. You got to do it now. Well, a lot of us fought against that privatization, but we were behind the 8 ball when we got into the fight. Right now we have an opportunity to stop the privatization of MARTA. We're in a better position today than we were when we were trying to stop the privatization of Grady. So we have to understand that this is part of a broad agenda to gentrify, to white out, to really push undesirables out of Metro Atlanta and toward the outskirts so that we can have a city for the elites.
I'm an ATLian too. I'm a native Atlanta, Grady baby, and this takes me back to the destruction of East Lake public housing, and when people organized around, the few people that were organizing around trying to stop that, something interesting happens there that is very relevant for me as a member of Occupy Atlanta, and someone who wants to organize to make transit better, public transit better. How they promised the golf course at East Lake, and they promised the YMCA, and they promised the charter school. And so what happens is, from an organizing standpoint, in my mind, is that you have poor black folks and, you know, activists, just regular folks, and then you have like a white, progressive, liberal layer that is against the poor community because they say, hey, look at this green space. We'll get a golf course, a lot of green space there. We'll get a YMCA. You'll get this charter school. That'll help black people. And so you end up, just like with the Beltline I'm feeling, where there's this bait that's out there that says, here are these progressive things. And in the shadows, you have poor folks who are going to get kicked out of their housing and have to scramble around and try to figure out what they're going to do. And that's the sort of mind-boggling thing to me. You'll have like so-called white progressive folks and black liberals as well saying this is great. And then you have poor people who just get stepped on. And then afterwards, no one understands why there's this animosity between white and black Atlanta, even so-called liberal and progressive folks, because there's these projects that screw over the historic 99% of Atlanta, and you have black and white, liberal and progressive people cheerleading it the whole way. And so I feel like that's what's happening now, and I'm wondering from an organizing standpoint, how can we look at this a little closer and make real alliances instead of this paper stuff where you have people who say they're progressive, Obama voters, whatever, shitting on black people, largely poor folks, and kicking them out of their houses. So how can we, you know, finesse this better this time?
I just have a question for you, just to clarify what the issue was. I'm not from Atlanta, but I know a family that lives in East Lake housing, and I've lived over in that area, so I know the area, but what are you saying happened? Because that's still public housing, right? That one area. It's like, oh, it's mixed income. So you're saying the transition from low-income housing to mixed income housing was the problem?
Well, it's not really public housing, right? So all of Atlanta's public housing was destroyed in 2010. Now this is called mixed income, which again is this public-private partnership that's really privatization. The only public part of it is that our tax dollars get given to private developers to build these communities. Now, these projects, these mixed income projects, would never fly politically unless a few crumbs were doled out to the people who had been on that land for decades. And what is that? Those crumbs? Oh, we'll let 10% come back. But the vast majority of the units in this community will go to affluent elites. So it's again kind of that bait and switch where, you know, we promote this as a healthy project for everybody, but it's really a project for elites, right? Under the cover of these 10-20% that they let come back.
So you're saying a lot of people were displaced and that property was, okay.
That's a fact. That's a fact.
Yeah. I'm just, as far as how to do it, how to get it the way that we want, I'm gonna be perfectly blunt like I always am, and it might cause controversy, and anybody in the circle and the park can call me an anarchist or a radical, but we don't ask for anything. We demand green spaces and MARTA to expand, because that's what they did in Sandy Springs and beyond North Atlanta to get the MARTA to go the direction that they wanted it to go. And as soon as they asked, or I'm sorry, they didn't ask, as soon as they demanded that they wanted an expansion of public transportation to wealthier people, then it expanded that direction. And so the reason that it's not out towards Stonecrest and it's only an idea, and the Beltline is not functioning in a plan towards blacks or lower income people or working class people or students, is because we're not demanding anything. That there's a group of people in Atlanta that we want to complain about the wrong things in Atlanta instead of saying, this is what I want out of Atlanta and we're gonna take it, or you're gonna give it to us. We're not gonna ask for anything. So.
It didn't happen that way, actually. It was MARTA worked with, like for the North Spring Sandy Springs line, MARTA worked with Bell South, and so it was a partnership with a business